Alright. Hvala najlepše, dobar dan svima. Hello. Morat ću da se pravi na engles u ostatku ove prezentacije. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm grateful to Koraljka and her team for the invitation, and also for all the great work that they are doing as part of our big DARIAH family. I also have to say that I am a big fan of keynotes, and not only because they are ego boosters, which they are, but also because they are a kind of luxury item in this day and age. They're the Manolo Blahniks and Balenciagas of the academic circuit. And the reason why they're so precious is because I think time is our most valuable asset. We are always pressed with time. We are always chasing deadlines, and we rarely get a chance to hold an audience hostage the way I will do today for 45 minutes, and to step back and give ourselves a chance to think about big questions, right? Because one of the things that we struggle with as academics is this incredible over-specialization that we are forced to be part of. We have to be experts for very, very tiny areas of knowledge in order to prove that we are making important contributions to academia and society at large. So when I get a chance, when I get invited, I am really grateful, and I appreciate the time that has been given to me. But also I have to say, I feel especially happy to be here because I feel I'm amongst dearest colleagues and friends. And as I said, Koraljka and her team are doing really wonderful things in DARIAH Croatia. And from the point of view of DARIAH EU, we are very grateful to have Croatian contribution to DARIAH. Except that my slides now don't work. Okay, I found it. So what will this talk be about? A couple of things. My starting point is that traditional peer review as a publish or perish kind of gatekeeping mechanism appears increasingly anachronistic in the digital age. Things are built based on the models of print culture, and something needs to change there. I also believe that things are systemically broken in the scholarly publication landscape, and I'll try to explain why. And finally, I will try to ask the question, what could DARIAH, and not DARIAH it, but DARIAH we, what could we do about it? How could DARIAH, as a distributed research infrastructure, help transform this landscape? Of course, why should DARIAH get a say in these matters in the first place? What's the primary role of a research infrastructure, and what do technology and digitality actually have to do with research assessment? Am I not mixing apples and oranges here? I don't think I am. I don't think I'm mixing apples or oranges, or grandmothers and frogs, as we would say in Serbian and Croatian. But in order to prove that, I will have to contextualize things a little bit more from the research infrastructure point of view, and generally speaking from a technological point of view, before I turn to my main argument. So let me take us back to an unlikely place and paint a little picture. When Hans Christian Andersen of the fairy tale fame was given a chance to test Denmark's first electric telegraph, half a year before it was released to the general public, he was overwhelmed with feelings of awe and wonder. In a way, I think his reaction was profoundly volcanic, which in my personal idiolect means really way too much. He got too excited. This is what he wrote. Many people claim that it is only in the material realm that our age is making progress. I do not concur with this, but also if I did, very well. then the material that we gain is like timber work erected for the construction of the spirit. People are pushed closer together, ideas are more easily exchanged, we shall become more like one people, one nation of the spirit. I'd like to have some of what he was having. Now, it's fascinating. It's fascinating how easy it is for some people to make the rhetorical and conceptual leap from the physical to the immaterial, from hardware to the symbolic, and from technology to God. For him, there was a direct line. And as academics, we are trained to sound alarm bells when we see such questions. And as humanists, to know better than to fetishize technology. But we also understand it's very easy to fetishize technology, especially when it's shiny and new, right? The problem with infrastructures, as with any technology, or indeed almost any material product of the civilization, is that it has dual nature. Infrastructures are built systems which facilitate the circulation of things, people, and signs across established paths and protocols. But as such, they're also, almost by default, seen as motors of change, propelling society into a better and brighter future. Infrastructures also have a tendency to disappear out of sight. Once the novelty of their implementation wears off, they tend to become invisible or self-evident. We become aware of infrastructure as infrastructure only when it breaks down. And also, infrastructures remain visible. When they remain visible, they do so usually by their absence in places where they do not exist, and where their lack is a very clear indicator of large-scale social inequalities and injustices. The same applies or should apply to digital research infrastructure. Yeah, what's a research infrastructure? Digital research infrastructure, a mediating set of technologies for conducting research, enabling resource discovery and collaboration, and facilitating dissemination of scholarly output. I repeat, facilitating dissemination of scholarly output. This will be crucial in the rest of this talk. It's part of what we do and what we are responsible for. At an even more basic level, infrastructures are about moving signs from point A to point B, using standardized paths and protocols for conversion or translation. So if you have an infrastructure, something gets moved. Sometimes it's people, but sometimes it's also data, as it is in our case. Now, what makes up a research infrastructure? Well, there's a lot of things. You have to start with tacit and explicit knowledge. You have to have networks and communities. You have to have software and services. You have to have research data collections, labs, tools, instruments, and buildings and facilities like this fancy new campus that we are in. But what is infrastructural about them is the manner in which they are made available, interoperable, and sustainable. Without these in place, these elements may exist, but within a silo that cannot be shared and reused at a level beyond the walled garden of a project or a limited user group or time limit. So there has to be coordination between different parts of a research infrastructure. Most of you will know that, and I won't get into much detail, that DARIAH has a long history. It was long in the making. Today, it is a European research infrastructure consortium with some 20 member countries and one observer country. Croatia is one of the founding members of DARIAH. And DARIAH's mission is to empower research communities with digital methods to create, connect, and share knowledge about cultures and society. And mission is what we do. And we also have a vision, although that's also a tricky word, because is it a vision or is it a hallucination? I don't know. The vision is what we strive towards, and that is to have arts and humanities be anchored at the center of a technologically evolving knowledge society. Okay, so we have some pretty noble goals. And to achieve that, we work on 4 strategic pillars. One is the marketplace to enable access to research solutions, tools, services, data, workflows, etc. And that's part of the European Open Science Cloud, or EOSC. The second pillar is education and training, complementing traditional training with corresponding material and alternative teaching methods in workshops, summer schools, hackathons. We have a platform called DARIAH Campus that you may know, where for sharing and discovering learning materials. The third pillar is transnational communities. We'd like to deepen the connection to our communities by creating light structures such as working groups. And I hear that the Teatralia working group was organizing things yesterday, so I'm very, very happy about that. So a bottom-up approach of organizing transnational research. And finally, there's foresight and policy work, where we try to build bridges between research policy and communities of practice. So far, so good. But what does this have to do with the scholarly publication landscape? Well, DARIAH users, DARIAH members, create a wide variety of research outputs. Yeah? So first of all, who are these DARIAH users? Well, there's diverse roles in careers in research that include not just social science and humanities researchers, which is probably most people in this room, but also librarians, archivists, museologists, annotators, data stewards, software engineers, data scientists, right? All of these parts are part of our audience and our members. People come in different career stages, from very junior to very senior people. And people come with different institutional affiliations. So you have full-time employees, you have tracks, you have citizen scientists, etc. All of them do different kinds of research missions. Some work on basic research, some work on cutting-edge frontier stuff, some work on applied research. Who do they work for? Well, mainly, of course, as a research infrastructure, we're addressing the scholarly audience. That's our primary audience. But there is also public outreach, science diplomacy, science communication, all kinds of different targets. And most importantly, what kind of research outputs do we have to deal with? Certainly, the traditional scholarly publication, journal articles and monographs, that's easy. But then there is also data, there's software, there's models, there's digital editions, there's algorithms, there's protocols, there's workflows, there's exhibitions, there's strategy papers that we write, there's policy contributions. So our landscape is extremely diverse. But which part of this landscape actually counts in terms of career advancement? Well, very few, right? Articles in peer-reviewed journals and to a lesser extent monographs. The big problem, this is a big problem because the way in which define success in academia and who and what we value actually drives our behaviors and culture. And if you look around, I would claim that A, peer review is broken. B, research article is an academic fetish object. And while we are tolerant, and we shouldn't dismiss things just because they are fetishes, out of some kind of antiquated moralistic urge, there are consequences to this fetishization. And this is what I'll discuss in a little bit. And the final problem that I want to address is that narrow quantitative metrics, which fail to properly recognize the quality and impact of diverse research outputs, are actually counterproductive. They make things worse and not better. They lead not to better and higher quality research, but the opposite of that. Now, why is peer review broken? Well, first of all, it takes forever to get anything published. right? You submit a article to a journal, and then if you're lucky within a year, but sometimes 2 years, it may get published. That is insane. I mean, you really have to stop and think about how crazy it is that you write something and get it published 2 years later. In the meantime, you've discovered new things. You have moved on to a different topic. We are constantly working with our former outputs. And this is built into the system. I would also say that pre-publication peer review is a relic of the print age. Because why do we have peer review at all? Well, in the good old days, do you think somebody, I'm not trying to compare myself to Aristotle, but did Aristotle have anybody to peer review before No. The reason why we have peer review is because with the print revolution, when we started producing texts en masse, so to speak, in great quantities, printing was very expensive. It was expensive to print, it was expensive to distribute and disseminate. So there had to be there had to be a system established that would actually filter things out, and that only some things would get to the stage where they get published. Of course, there's the question of quality. It's part of the equation, but the cost incentive is a strong factor in why we have the peer review system the way we do. But I would like to ask, do we really need journals as gatekeepers in the digital age? What does it mean to filter things out for publication when we can actually get access to everything, every research output, etc., if it's properly stored in a repository, etc.? Yeah? We can search for things, we can find them. We need this filtering mechanism in the print age because ultimately, there would be so many journals published and you would have to go to the library to get it. But things have actually dramatically shifted in the digital world. So is it appropriate to have gatekeepers? The next question is, what is groundbreaking research? What is innovation? I think a lot of incentives and inputs that we get from the funders and from the journals is based on this kind of rhetorical extravagance, which leads to overblown expectations, when in reality, we know that all we can hope for is small incremental steps, right? We walk on the shoulders of giants, etc., and it's true, and we have to be honest about it. I think it's much better to be honest about it and try to adapt the system to it than to play this game and constantly prove that you are producing earth-shattering discoveries, because ultimately that doesn't serve science, right? We really should be realistic about what it is that we're trying to achieve. And my final point here is, let's not even start talking about the ruinous effect of impact factors on small fields and small languages. Yeah? If you're working on, I don't know, 18th century Croatian encyclopedias, you are not going to publish in Nature. Yeah? So deal with it, right? Like, why do we punish small languages, small fields constantly by adopting these STEM-based models? So something is broken there. The research article itself, why do I say it's a fetish object? Because, well, our whole careers are built on them. And I'm not saying that synthesis is not important. Of course it is. I'm not that, I'm not completely crazy. But because of the constraints of the genre, research article is a genre, and because of the enduring impact of the print medium on the scholarly mind, the research article sometimes obscures as much as it reveals. Because if you publish the synthesis, you're publishing these impressive results and your, earth-shattering discoveries. But there's a lot of hidden labor behind research outputs, and they don't make it to the research article. There's a lot of methodology, there's a lot of data annotation, I mean, in our field, in digital humanities, there's a lot of work that gets done that nobody gets credit for. So what about your methodologies, modeling, data sets, workflows, procedures, experiments, annotations? Who gets credit for them? And finally, I think narrow journal-based metrics are counterproductive because they promote quantity and speed at the expense of quality and rigor. So we end up in many places with a hyperproduction of journal articles of questionable quality, right? If your funder or university is telling you that you have to have so many points in so many, in such and such journals, I have seen in various countries that it leads to people actually not working on better articles, but working on producing more articles. And then like where is the sense in that? This then leads to the emergence of predatory journals and predatory conferences. And we get all sorts of crap in our emails, but these emails when somebody's inviting you to publish in their journal, that this is and pay for it, of course, is the same as a Nigerian prince asking to move money into your account. It's ridiculous, but people actually fall for it, and some people have to fall for it because of the constraints or the pressures that they get from their university administration or funder. This kind of system also encourages publishing in paywalled journals because of their high impact factor, despite the availability of open access alternatives. And I really don't want to shame anybody. I totally get it. If you're a young researcher, you have to publish in a high impact factor, and you may end up publishing in a paywalled journal because you have no other option. You need it for your promotion, you need it for your tenure, etc. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to put blame on individuals here. I'm just trying to point out how unfair and it's sometimes absurd this system is. This, I would claim, then also leads to risk aversity, because taking risks may actually reduce the chances of publication. And finally, all of this, generates excessive attention to rankings that actually hinders collaboration. All these obsessions with university language, are you on the Shanghai list in the first 500 universities? So it's meaningless. And I think it can also lead to wasted efforts, time, and resources through the duplication of work, because negative findings often go largely unreported, right? Because you have to report successes. Nobody will give you credit if you write about your failed experiments in digital humanities. Things are a little bit better, but in traditional humanities, things that don't work get shoved under the carpet. Luckily, people are taking notice, right? I'm certainly not the first one to notice these things. And yesterday we had a lovely conversation on the way from Zagreb to Rijeka about this and various projects that are emerging in this space. And some places to look for if you are new to this: the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, Leiden Manifesto for Research Metrics, Hong Kong Principles for Assessing Researchers, and most importantly for us in this context, the Agreement on Reforming Research Assessment, which is a European initiative that was released in July 2022. During the European Research and Innovation Days. And so the European Commission is heavily invested in this. So the agreement was published in July, and it was the result of a co-creation process involving more than 350 organizations from 40 countries, organizations that included public and private research funders, universities, research centers, institutes, infrastructures, national and regional authorities, accreditation, evaluation agencies, etc. So a very, very broad landscape of stakeholders was involved in producing this agreement. And the agreement is based on 10 priorities. I won't go into all 10 of them, but just mention the first 3 because they really reflect the kinds of issues the kinds of issues that I've been addressing in my talk so far. So the agreement is to recognize the diversity of contributions to and careers in research. The agreement is to base research assessment primarily on qualitative evaluation, for which peer review is central, supported by responsible use of quantitative indicators. And 3, abandon inappropriate uses in research assessment of journal and publication-based metrics, in particular, inappropriate uses of journal impact factor and age index and things like that. If this is news to you, go check out the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessments. They have a nice website where they publish the results of the agreement. And since 2 weeks ago, different institutions can actually become signatories of this agreement and become part of the coalition. And the nice thing to see so far, it's been only 2 weeks since the signing was opened, that some of the big funders, some of the big shots are there. So you have the Deutsche DFG, Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, Swiss National Science Foundation, the Dutch Research Council, the French National Agency. So some really heavy hitters have agreed to support this initiative. There is still time to join the initiative, but I think it would be very important for universities also to sign on here, because funders deal with projects and funding projects, etc. But universities, this is where the power lies in terms of tenure and promotion, and this is really important that things get changed there. I was delighted to see this morning that the University of Rijeka is a signatory. The first and only institution from Croatia so far. I hope there will be more. And I certainly hope that your Ministry of Research put some pressure. This needs to happen because this is hugely important. Now, what can and should DARIAH do other than just sign this agreement? Yeah? Which we will. We can offer and maintain an infrastructure for not publication, but publication. So for post-publication peer review in the form of a DARIAH overlay journal. Okay, so what I will talk about now, which is directly from the DARIAH kitchen. We're working on this. We're not there yet. You're getting an exclusive preview of our thinking and of our plans. So what is an overlay journal, and what is this post-publication peer review model? This is how it works. You write your article, or you collect your whatever that research output. You create some research output. We are calling it article as a shorthand, but it could be some data. It could be a review of training materials, whatever. And what you do with it, you don't send it to a journal. You publish it, you deposit it in your institutional repository. So the first thing you do is you make your output public, okay? Then, from this repository, you submit it for official publication in a yet unnamed DARIAH journal, or some other overlay journal. Bear with me, slowly. So your article continues to live in your repository. The metadata is sent to the journal. The journal accepts it for publication and sends it to peer review. The peer review happens. The comments get back to you, and you publish a second version of your article. It's still living there, but luckily, because we're in the 21st century and we have repositories that treat everything as versioned objects, your article starts to evolve over time. Okay. If the peer reviewers are satisfied, you inform the overlay journal, the peer reviewers are satisfied, and DARIAH, or whoever owns this overlay journal, issues a certificate of publication. Your research output continues to stay and live in your repository, but it gets an official stamp of approval and a citation that says this research output was published in such and such journal, even though it continues to live where it was in the first place. This also gives you an opportunity to continue working on it, to have yet another version and another version. All this is actually tracked by the system. And by doing this, we radically decenter the whole landscape, because we are giving the power to you as the author to control the versioning of your article, but we also create a system where there is some kind of peer review and quality control that gives you this certification or stamp of approval, and you have a citable object. So why is this cool? One, because publication, making something public, is decoupled from evaluation certification. Yeah? I think publication should be step number one. And in a way, if you think about it, for monographs, this is actually, you know, I don't know why we're so hung up on research articles and why they have to go to peer review before they're published, because books are usually published. I mean, there are some, you know, recensias, as we call them, right? But that's different. The actual reviewing of the books happens once it's published. There's articles about them, etc. like that. Anyway, so I think this is interesting. Make something public and then send it for evaluation. Two, published asset is a versioned object, as I said. Welcome to the 21st century. So let's forget about, because even in online journals these days, once you publish it, that's it. It doesn't evolve more over time. And three, why is this cool? Published assets can be anything: a scholarly paper, ephemeral or experimental outputs, descriptions and analysis of data collections and workflows, annotation practices, software reviews, reviews of training materials, etc. We need to expand what we consider a research output worthy of publication and review. Okay, so but what about impact, right? We can't pretend it's not the rule of the game today. And this is why I will say I'm not here to ruin young people's careers by telling them not to publish in high-impact journals. I'm here to talk about the long-term plan to change the landscape. So we can't pretend it's not the rule of the game today. It takes time to build impact. It takes infrastructural, for a journal, it takes the infrastructural maturity. And the prestige of a journal is defined by the community associated with it and the optimal pace of reviewing and publication, right? So if we go for this, if we create a DARIAH overlay journal, it will take time to build impact. There's no question about that. But I think DARIAH can actually afford to play the long-term game here, because we have a strong community, and we can use the community to strengthen the brand of this new journal. We can use the journal as another layer connecting the dots in our distributed infrastructure. And very importantly, we can use the journal to contribute to the citability of individual data sets or diverse research outputs. Yeah? Because all that hidden labor that I was talking about will become less hidden if it's turned into citable objects. If you can share early results, if you can share, provisional, if you can share your failures, if you can cite it, it actually exists in the academic world. So this would actually solve one of those problems. And the best news is that we actually have the infrastructure for this, okay? There's a wonderful French platform called Episciences, episciences.org, that creates an infrastructure for overlay journals. It currently works with only 3 repositories, with Zenodo, with HAL, I think, and Archive. But one of the things that we could do as DARIAH is help Episciences to add new repositories to the platform. So in my crazy dreams, we would have, national repositories all over Europe, in Croatia, in Sweden, wherever, become part of this federated of DARIAH overlay journal, so that you could publish your things in your repository and still get the certificate of publication and all the credit that goes with it. So this is what we're thinking about. This would be a big effort and a big change of direction, not change of direction, but a big new initiative for DARIAH. And it would take up a lot of effort, right? We would need to set up the editorial board, establish and maintain a pool of reviewers who also should get certification of contribution, right, for the work that they do. We would need to expand the number of Episciences affiliated repositories in DARIAH member states. And we would have to do all that with limited resources available to us at the DARIAH Coordination Office. So I'm not minimizing the challenge here, but we are seriously thinking about it and trying to see how we could make it happen. We would also need a name for this thing, right? I have no idea what it would be called: transformations, foundation, intersections, infrastructure, workflows, whatever, some kind of name. If you have ideas, let me know. Kako? Revolucija, sure. I like, actually we could call it revolutions, because there's the different kinds of revolutions that true. The thing is, we also have to be careful, because if it's too crazy, funders and people won't take it seriously. So we have to find the right balance of creative and serious sounding. But I like revolutions, yeah. And yeah, as I said, we really do want your input. So please get in touch if you're interested in helping make the DARIAH Overlay Journal a reality. It will be happening over the next year, and we'll certainly keep you through Korelka, through the National Coordinators Committee. We'll keep you informed of what's happening in this area. We really can do this. We can only do this together, right? So this can be an initiative from DARIAH EU. We can provide the infrastructure, etc., but this needs to be taken up by the community for it to work. So if there is no feedback from the community, if there's no interest, then we can't really force anybody to embark on this crazy new adventure. But I'm hopeful, and from the reactions I've heard so far, that there is interest. So the official title of this talk, which wasn't in the abstract, was the future of the scholarly landscape, publishing landscape between a rant and a dream. And I think you know now why, because this is exactly what this has been. But is there a bright future for scholarly publishing? Well, it all comes down to whether you are a glass half empty or glass half full kind of guy, although the glass is actually never empty, right? Unless you're in a vacuum. So the glass is always full, even with half water, half. That just means I'm an incorrigible optimist in that sense. Let's keep our fingers crossed. And let's take some takeaway messages from this, is that we should work consistently on expanding the notion of what counts as research output. We should do everything we can to put pressure on those who actually decide about this. And that means, university administrations, funders, etc. We should work on different models of peer review, post-publication, open peer review. We should think about, all kinds of questions related to peer review and what counts as groundbreaking research. We should question the gatekeeping role of scholarly journals in the digital age. And as far as the agreement on the reform of scholarly assessment is concerned, we should support and sign it, but also monitor its progress, because the signatories commit to enact this reform by 2027. Now, that may sound not too far into the future, but change is slow, right? Like it takes to do this properly, to have the funders change their procedures, to have universities adopt measures to do this qualitative analysis in their job recruitment processes, etc. It takes time. But we should also question some of the assumptions in the agreement on the reform of scholarly assessment. And one thing that I have a particular pick for is, does it make sense to argue that we need peer review, which is both transparent and confidential? This is in the report, in the agreement, right? What does that mean? How can something be both transparent and confidential? And of course, the reason why they're putting that is because there are certain institutions, people, forces at hand who do believe that double-blind peer review is the only way to do peer review. You don't know who's the author doesn't know who's the reviewer. I'm not convinced. I don't think there's inherent value in that, for many reasons. A, because in small fields, that's a joke, right? And we know that when we are reviewing conference papers, we often know who the author is, etc. So we are participating in this kind of charade that doesn't actually adequately correspond to reality. But even more importantly, I think we should try to keep pushing the envelope and work towards open post-publication peer review as a digitally mediated open dialogue, as a new kind of republic of letters. Because in an ideal world, I know this is really, really hard, but in an ideal world, peer review shouldn't be about exercising your ego as a reviewer and showing how you know more than the person you are reviewing. It should be a dialogue out in the open about things that we care about knowledge. It should be about advancing knowledge and not be, not serve just as this kind of cruel gatekeeping mechanism. So it's tricky, but I think it's worth working on that. And finally, we should remember, thinking about the role of research infrastructures in this process, we should remember that technology is actually easy, but social change is not. We can offer the tools, we can create an overlay journal, but what we actually need is a cultural change, which also means that we need, above all, patience and tenacity. This will take time, but times are changing, and some of us are hopeful. Research infrastructures such as DARIAH, Clarin, and Operas, to name just a few, I think have a very important role to play in this process, precisely because we deal with all these different kinds of research outputs, right? Not only journal articles. And we want to try to convince everybody that is important. So that's it, easy peasy. Thank you so much for bearing with me.
So much, Tom, for this great and very inspirational lecture. And yes, I agree with you that the DARIAH community is really big and great, and have enough power strength to make some changes and do the revolution. Yes, and I think you raised a lot of interesting questions and issues that we can discuss now. maybe the least important, but the funniest would be to continue this discussion about the name of the Daria. So yes, but let's see what the participants wants to know. Do you have any questions, comments for Toma? Another proposal for the journal. Susan, if you can speak up to because of the online participants.
Speak up. That's very hard for Susan. Susan is so soft-spoken.
Initiative and idea, obviously you can build it in different ways. Already, and when shine very nicely with what I want to talk tomorrow, how you evaluate and give credit for non-standard academic. But I had a couple of comments, and these are the things that kind of trouble me, and don't necessarily need that people who speak about more when you're talking about kind of environment and work. So I have a couple of them. One of them, and I'll start maybe with the last comment, one of the last things that you made. I've tried in other circumstances, and I know other people have too, have more of a reviewing dialogue. But one of the problems is finding reviewers. Even for, let's just call it last standard article, but then the time it takes often to review these non-standard, I realized in working with this how easy it is to review an article, for example. We understand the pieces that are supposed to have the flow and narrative. But in doing a data set, or in doing even trying to review which individual scholarly data. So how would you, well, and part of the answer I imagine that I don't know if that's not, we don't get credit for it. But how do you get someone or attract someone or find a key person or people to review the very non-standard and make it worth their while in our time
If I knew the answer, I would have already done it, you know, but I couldn't agree more with you that this is one of the big challenges that we have. I think what we'll try, we have to be pragmatic about it. What we will, and why I keep talking about this overlay journal as a potential thing for us to do is because I cannot commit to getting it done within so many days because I know this is a long process. But part of the process for us will be to work together with national DARIAHs on establishing criteria for these kinds of reviews. And I would say we would also need to simplify things without losing the rigor of the review process. I don't know how to do that quite exactly yet, but if we are trying to establish the bar for publication for something that is clear, internally coherent, lucid, whatever you want to call it, well documented, and if we don't have to deal with these overly ambitious arguments about whether something is innovative, whether something is doing groundbreaking research, etc. I think we could find the middle spot between old traditional peer review and this new kind of peer review, which would be enough to make sure that good things, that we do some filtering, but we leave it to the users, to the audience to be the final judge of whether something is worth citing or not. I don't think that should be the job of the reviewer. The reviewer should be the initial step to kind of formally recognize this is something worth having. But I think the bar shouldn't be too high in that sense. Do you know what I mean?
already. There's some bar review, it's not getting, it's more complicated and patient, et cetera, but then also the thing. One was published, the audience, then say they're interested or not in this research,
It's true, but some things don't get published.
yes, exactly.
Some things get turned down. And I think, maybe you didn't experience it yourself, but I'm sure you have enough anecdotal evidence even in your communities that some things we take for granted. For instance, two reviewers per paper. Like that's an arbitrary number. Why is 2 reviewers enough? I'm not saying we should have 10 because it's hard enough to get 2. But who guarantees that the reviewers are competent enough for this thing? Who guarantees that the journal editors, when you have, I've had this number of times, you submit something, you get 2 reviews, and they're radically opposed. One says this is great, one says this is crap. And then the journal editor, if he's good, conscientious, he or she, and has enough time, they will ask for a 3rd review, they will try to do some mediation. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's easier to just say, okay, one of the reviewers thinks this is not worth it, kill it. I think these are the things that we can avoid with a proper discussion on how to structure this process and simplify the whole system. But I'm with you 100%. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying we'll succeed. I just think it's really worth giving it a try.
I'm kind of like the idea. I'm not completely clear about the details because I very much agree with you about the landscape we are looking. So, in your idea of versions, when the journals would be kind of looking into improved version, they would say that you are self-plagiarizing yourself because it is a new version of the former version.
All journals would think that. Our journal wouldn't.
How do you see the position of journal in this landscape? I also think that related to the peer review discussion, for instance, the role of editors would be much more prominent. Like not only okay, I'm doing something, I'm putting something together, also kind of having this sometimes a reviewer kind of role, especially when mediating in between 2 different, because it takes time to find a third reviewer and all these things.
Yeah.
But is it, of course, no, because otherwise we are objective, not objective. I'm never sure who is objective.
Yeah.
But with all these journals in small countries, they don't make any money. In the, we all encouraged to publish in the UK, and then we have to waive our copyright. We have to pay, if we want to then later keep it open access, it's extremely expensive.
Exactly.
And there is nobody paying for it, and or you somehow you have to pay for it, or you have to pay for the journal, or you have to infringe copyright by disseminating your work yourself. So the business model in this story of yours also has been kind of thought about, and I think you have not been thinking about the business model aspect because
I don't agree. This is the part I agree with everything you said so far. I don't agree with the last bit because the institution of the overlay journal precisely does away. First of all, it does away with commercial publishers are out in this vision. Okay, they have no role to play because you have an infrastructure, you have repositories, and you have us at DARIAH or whoever owns the overlay journal coordinating the peer review process.
But then the present publishers would at some point transform them into overlay journals or not?
I doubt it because there's no money to be made there. There's no money to be made there. And there are so, all the Elsevier's of this world. This is, I often also just, have to pinch myself, and I can't believe that they have such power. I get it. I get high impact journals. I get it all. But there was recently an article I read about how Elsevier, as part of the subscription model that they offer to the libraries and universities, some of the things that they offer on these subscription models are textbooks, okay, that are used by students in classes. And then recently they did one of those ridiculous price hikes before the beginning of the semester. And some university says, look, there's no way we, and it's not by 2%, by, a huge amount. The whole semester has been planned. The textbooks are going to be used by the students in all these different classes. And suddenly the university doesn't have access to these, to this content that was planned. So I want these kinds of things to disappear.
This is my kind of purpose, the revolution.
Yes. No, but look, I don't have answers to all the questions, but I do think that if, research infrastructures are public institutions, but with publicly funded money, we have members that are nobody's here for profit, and we have a community that is used to doing reviewing, and we often do reviewing for free. So all I'm trying to say is, let's try to shift some of that time that we spend reviewing for commercial journals on a new initiative that would help us build a new kind of journal that will hopefully over time build its own impact as well.
And I agree with you. I'm not saying that even NGOs and non-for-profit initiatives need their business model, because nothing is completely costless.
Yeah. True. No, exactly. So even running this coordinated takes time.
It's not just like a fantasy or
True.
it can be a plan and a project. But then you have to think about this.
I agree. That's why I said this is not happening tomorrow. We have still a lot of things to figure out. So yeah, I agree completely.
Very briefly, it's a vulnerable idea that takes time and very tenacious character to do it. But something that could be challenged as well, because I'm also a member of one of the editorial boards of a time in the academia. We are a very versatile community. And when you take into account all the disciplines that we covered, from the classical philology to history, digitized media, this would be wonderful think tank and very advantageous for small languages that you call us. And you're absolutely right, but we have to devise a unique house style, because different disciplines have different preferences, different house styles, different citations, different citabilities, etc. So that's going to be a challenge.
I couldn't agree more. I think one thing that we should, if we go down this path, is to, in the beginning at least, focus on everything but the journal, the traditional scholarly article. Okay, that's step number one, because nobody will want to publish a synthetic article in this new emerging experimental kind of space. But B, I think it would be easier to establish these cross-disciplinary agreements on different categories of research output. So if you have a data set, we can all agree how to describe a data set. If you have a description of a workflow, well, we can design some general rules about describing steps and, tools used, et cetera, et cetera. So I think one of the ways to make this happen is while the overall idea is super ambitious, is to try to take it in individual steps that are maybe less disruptive, and then try to build on that. But I still think that if anybody is in a position to try to experiment in this area, it is research infrastructures, because we, I think an individual university is unlikely to start something like this because it's too disruptive for them, right? They have their systems, they have their procedures, etc. But because research infrastructures are dealing with researchers, but are slightly outside the, are not themselves research producing institutions, but we are there to help. I think we are in that soft spot where we can actually experiment and see where this goes. But I mean, as I said, I'm not completely crazy. I do understand that this is a huge thing, and there is no guarantees that it will succeed. But, and I'll just say one more thing, and then we really need to go to the break, is I think this is important from a purely infrastructural point of view, or from DARIAH's point of view, because we also want to be in a position to highlight the diversity of research outputs that happen in our communities, right? We want to be able to cite different data sets and softwares and training materials and things that get developed that contribute to knowledge sharing and knowledge generation of new knowledge, right? So even from a very narrow and selfish point of view, I think this would be a good thing for DARIAH as an infrastructure to have a way of providing certain certification and evaluation and referencing to these different things that we do. So I was, of course, joking when I said, let's change I mean, I'm not joking and I am joking, let's change the world. But there are things we can change within DARIAH that would be good enough if we succeed. All right.
Thank you.
Let's have coffee. And thank you so much. Yeah, thanks.